All rise. Battle of the Network Shows Season 11 is now in session. The Honorable Rewind v. Stubbs presiding. Battle of the Network Shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome to Battle of the Network Shows, Season 11. For the defense, I'm Mike.
And I'm Rick. Hello, everyone. I guess that makes me for the prosecution?
I guess so, yeah.
Well, couldn't I be like a hip bailiff or something? Or
You could be.
like a aggrieved
hip
but
bailiff?
accessible court clerk? Or yeah, I'm trying not to totally copy the original Night Court.
Yeah, I see.
I thought maybe I could like revamp it, but maybe go in slightly different directions with some of the characters. But
Right.
just an idea.
That's No one would ever do that.
No, I don't
No.
think so.
Yeah, you would be you could be a good Mac.
You think so?
I don't know. I don't know how organized.
Well, I could be organized. I'm not Mac organized.
Right,
Not
yeah.
that level, but I would have to up my sweater game for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you have the contacts.
I don't know if the same brand of contact lenses. I mean,
No.
I do wear. Oh, you mean like his?
His seemingly unending
Yes, his network of.
network of informants.
He's got Vietnam buddies. You
Yep.
start right there, kind of like Magnum.
Yeah.
Kind of Magnum PI, right?
That's right, yeah.
I wonder if he served with Magnum.
He might have, yeah.
The timeline would be about right, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, well.
Sure. I bet they cross paths at least.
I guess I would rather be like something like that than a judge. I don't know if I'd want the pressure of being a judge in a Manhattan criminal court system.
Yeah. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Harry makes it look like fun, but I don't think for me, I don't think I could pull that off.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe as far as like administering justice, I could do that.
Oh, sure.
But like to have fun while doing it, that I'd be a little bit more skeptical of that.
I definitely would.
No,
Yeah. I don't know if I'd want to be any of those people, frankly.
no, not even a defense attorney.
It seems cool on TV,
But yeah,
especially like God bless public defenders.
right.
Seems a little thing, especially on the night court level,
Yeah,
where they're really just mostly losing.
yeah,
And just sort of like trying to make it a little less painful for the people.
right. A lot of it's relatively low stakes too. Like it seems like anything that's really big, it gets just carried over to like a different court, like a grand jury or something, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the most you can do is like put it off, I guess.
Right.
In most cases, yeah.
So yeah, if you haven't guessed, we're talking about Night Court.
Yes.
Opening the season with Night Court. Finally, this has been on the big board from the beginning, I think.
I think you're right. We really wanted to make sure that the series was more accessible, and I think we said, "Hey, as soon as it's up there, we'll do it." And we've lived up to our word,
Yes, we
our
have.
promise to our sacred oath to ourselves.
Yes.
It was almost like we were sworn in court. I don't know. We promised ourselves something. I don't. But we're doing it mainly because the show is the time of this recording, which of course is now live when you hear it. But
Whenever you.
yes, exactly. Whenever you hear it, it's on Freevee, formerly IMDb TV, and you can see all nine seasons. Before it was on DVD, but the DVDs were kind of expensive, except for the first couple seasons. So now is what I would consider accessible. I mean, for a while it wasn't even on TV that much. It was on like a sub channel called Laugh TV. I don't even know if that's still around in that form. But for years, I don't remember seeing it in like syndication at all. But when I grew up, I watched it a lot in reruns.
Yeah, long time.
No, it was, and it was on A&E Network for quite a while too, I believe.
Yeah.
And do we work on this in a professional capacity?
I think we did.
It might have been for a run on maybe TV Land. It was on TV Land for a while too, and could have been Arts and Entertainment.
Lifetime.
Yeah, that sounds right. I think Lifetime and A&E were owned by the same company for a while. But overall, though, Mike, I know people love the show, and I want to give a couple shout outs too. But I think the show's underappreciated, and we can get into that today. But do you mind if I give a couple shout outs here?
No.
Okay, first of all, let me give a shout out to Ian, our friend of the show, who we talked about before. Most notably, I think when we did When Things Are Rotten and our Forgotten Sitcoms episode a while ago, that he helped us out with that.
And BJ and the.
That's right, BJ and the Bear. Yeah, I forgot we did BJ and the Bear.
Yeah.
To be honest. I'm so my Greg Evigan thinking is centered on You're at the Top.
Yeah.
But anyways, I know Ian is Night Court is one of his favorite shows. He does a great podcast called Ian Talks Comedy, and Mike and I both recommend you check that out. He's had an amazing roster of guests, like people that really did great work in television industry, movies, and all kinds of stuff. But he helped us pick the episode we're going to talk about today. But just want to thank him for supporting the podcast, and had Night Court on our minds. I think because he mentions it often on his podcast.
Right, and thank him for the podcast because he really is doing some good work.
He talks to a lot of people that you might have seen the name in the credits or something, but they haven't been making the circuit with other podcasts. So or anywhere really.
Right. I'll let you do the other shout out and then
Okay. So a quick shout out to my friend Ben, who I've known many, many, many years. And Night Court was his favorite show for many years. He loved Night Court. And I remember throughout high school and even beyond, he was always good at making Night Court references and keeping the show kind of alive in everybody's memory. And he was a huge Night Court fan. So Ben, I hope you're listening. And this one's for you as well. And hope we do the show justice.
So back to Ian's podcast. I listened to an excellent episode he did with Tom Reeder, who was one of the writers on the first 6 seasons of Night Court. Also, this guy, he wrote for Barney Miller, Night Court, MASH, and Cheers.
Wow.
Among and lots of other things. But I don't know if anybody has those 4 credits besides
that's
him.
amazing, yeah.
Yeah. And he was, he would write, I think, like an episode a year of Cheers. Also Frasier.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Another one. But it's a really cool interview, and he did answer a couple questions that I had in my mind.
Awesome.
One was the pronunciation of the show's creator, of Night Court's creator's name.
Okay. I've heard it different ways, but...
He said it Reinhold Weege.
Weege, not
yes.
Weege. Weege.
Yeah.
Weege.
Yeah.
Weege. Reinhold Weege, okay.
Yes. So that was good to know. I mean, he knew him, and he often referred to him as Reiny.
Reiny?
Yes.
Oh, man, I haven't heard that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I in my mind, it was always Weege. But I figured it was probably really Weege.
Yeah.
But it was more fun to say Weege.
Yeah.
The other one was more about the production of it. I was having these questions while watching the show, which was I started to get in my head like, oh, maybe they didn't film this in front of an audience because the set is very elaborate and they do a lot of sometimes like a lot of adventurous camera things that you would normally see on a sitcom on videotape.
Yeah, for a show with a relatively small number of sets, there's a little bit more dynamism would be the word for it. Or that's a good point.
I mean, if you think about the set, I mean, the courtroom is a huge set, and then there's if you're facing it, as we are always because we're on the watching on TV. To the left, there's Harry's office, but there's that hallway in between,
right,
which loops around the courtroom, and then there's a cafeteria. Yeah, I mean that's a lot of space. Plus, they do have those swing sets and things sometimes. The roof and the people's apartments. And
maybe a jail. There's a small jail.
That's right. Yeah.
That they use sometimes. Yeah.
Broom closet that Dan uses sometimes.
Yes.
So I started to think, oh, maybe, and Mark Evanier wrote something about how after the first or second season of Bilko that they started doing the thing where they filmed it and then showed it for an audience. And I thought, oh, maybe that's what they were doing at Night Court.
And what did Tom Reeder say?
Mostly an audience, but he was talking specifically about an episode called Safe, where Harry gets stuck in a safe. And all the Harry parts they filmed separately. Okay. Because it was too... Yeah. It was a dark space. And
right.
There's just...
That's basically just for logistical reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, which, that's what Seinfeld did with a lot of their outdoor things. And I'm sure lots and lots of sitcoms do that. It's just... Right. I didn't know. I mean, I thought, oh, well, maybe they just had a laugh track and Reinhold Weege's laugh. Yeah. Real laugh, like that's coming from the filming. Yes. And everything else is added in later.
For anybody that doesn't know, the Starry Night Productions title card at the end features his laugh, right? Yeah. That people sitting as an audience or whatever, and his laugh can also be heard throughout each episode, I guess.
Yeah. Which confused me as a kid because it sounds a lot like Harry Anderson's laugh.
Yeah.
Like, why is... And then I remember reading or something, maybe a TV Guide article where they mentioned how his laugh was always there. Anyway, those are the answers I got. And he talked about some of the casting stuff. Told some good stories that you should just listen to the episode because he has good stories about Barney Miller and all those other shows too.
Yeah, and if you think about it, that kind of getting back to my point, Cheers, MASH, Frasier even... legendary sitcoms. Yeah. Barney Miller, not quite on that level, but it's like a writer's sitcom, like very well respected. And I think a show like for people that you don't think would really like be into television seem to like Barney Miller. Like I think I mentioned my AP history teacher liked Barney Miller.
Right,
Showed
yeah.
an episode of it in class one time. But Night Court does not get nearly the same respect as those other shows. And, I could speculate, maybe we'll kind of get into it, but
Right.
I think that's a shame. I mean, I would even say, like, this is something I think we were talking about a little bit. There's not a lot out there in Night Court. Even, like, if you just look at the Wikipedia page, it's like one of the sparsest Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
For something that lasted 9 seasons and, like, almost 200 episodes, you usually will see, like, a little bit about the production and the development of the show, and there's really not all that much.
Right.
Which is why, these Ian podcasts are great and to be such a fan of the show because, I mean, it's easy to find out, okay, Reinhold, as I like to call him, of course. Yeah. He worked on Barney Miller, and he wanted to do something similar. He had this idea, You get the very origin of it. Yeah. But then there's all this 9 seasons worth of production. And, like, it seems like you get more. I was able to see more about, like, the last couple of years that didn't work as well than the show in its prime.
Yeah.
And maybe people will talk about, the bailiffs dying, and stuff like that.
Right.
And some of the weirdness of the casting. But I think the show deserves a little bit more respect than that. I'm curious, like you were, about, how was it to work on the show? Like, how did they develop the characters? What was their goals and stuff? And just basics of like why did it, it get moved around on NBC a little bit? It's hard to find information about it. Mm-hmm. And,
and it's harder right now too, because of the reboot or the new version is clogging up Google.
That's right. That's very true. That's very true. And, if you think about it too, like how many stars of Night Court, has anybody even written like a memoir or anything? Or like anybody involved with the show?
I don't think so.
Whereas I don't think Harry Anderson did or Marky Post.
No. I mean, I bet John Larroquette could write a pretty interesting one.
Yeah, yeah. I remember listening to I've listened to maybe a long form interview or two with John Larroquette, but like everybody else, they didn't really put down a lot of this stuff, I don't think.
Yeah.
And the creative types, I did a quick look through like the Brendan Tartikoff and Warren Littlefield books. Mm-hmm. Okay, Tartikoff was there at the beginning of Night Court, kind of in the 80s, and he was on an episode of Night Court.
Yes. Warren
Littlefield, Night Court was a little bit before like the beginning of Must See TV, but I think there's like one passing reference and to the but that was kind of like the early, the predecessor to Must See TV was that Thursday night lineup. And it's like, but if you look at some of these same things, Cheers, Cheers is legendary for, going from almost, worst to first and the ratings and everything. But, hey, where's the love for Night Court?
Right.
It was a very funny show.
Yeah.
It's good.
I bet Warren Littlefield didn't like it as much.
Yeah, I could see that. I don't know why exactly, but
it's just because his attitude about some other like shows like Homicide was, well, it's good, but people don't want dark, Even though now he produces things like Fargo, but but in terms of network TV,
right?
I guess he's always got his finger to the wind.
Yes. Well, there's just not that much. And am I saying like I do think like the last 3 seasons, most people would say it declined like at the end.
Yeah.
I think that maybe hurts the legacy of the show. I wonder if it's kind of like if you have like an athlete who has a super great like prime, but like things end horribly. It's almost like it tarnishes the reputation of the rest of the show. And I wonder if that's what happened here because,
or say, retires and then comes back.
Yeah.
As a player coach.
Yeah, yeah, that could be.
Yeah,
it could be. Yeah, I wonder if that kind of affects. Like, I guess let me ask it like this: if Night Court had gone off the air after like the 6th season. Would it be thought of better? Would the reputation be better today, or would it have made a difference?
Yeah, I don't know, but possibly.
I mean, I think the ratings went down a lot too. And like the episode we're going to talk about, actually, it was right before I think the show moved off Thursday nights. So if you look at it, it was a very big rating success as long as it was after Cosby, not directly after Cosby, but you have Cosby, Family Ties, Cheers, Night Court. Right. To me, that's classic Thursday night NBC. Yeah. But after like the 4th or 5th season or whatever. Night Court became like a Wednesday night show basically, and it didn't get as good ratings ever again.
Right, and after the 6th season, Riney and Tom Reeder at least both left.
Yeah,
but I'm sure no offense to Tom Reeder, but Riney,
leaving
is a big deal, and
more impactful.
I think they were both it sounded like they were burnt out.
Yeah,
and I think the people that took over were probably people who had been with the show for a while.
Right.
But I only watched part of an episode that period, and it was the final Yakov episode, and it just felt something fell off.
Yeah, I explored a little bit, and I remember at the time like being disappointed with what was going on, but they were they seem to be, there was more of an emphasis on character for a while. And I guess one thing that they say is that they wanted to make it less broad comedy in some ways and more character based, which sounds good. But then when you look at it, like I was watching an episode from the ninth season, and there was like an A story, a B story, and a C story.
Whoa.
And they were like why does a 25-minute sitcom necessarily need like 3 different storylines? And to me, it actually works better probably with just one storyline with everybody involved, like an ensemble and everything. But I was like, see, right away, this is bad. And the characters changed. It seemed like they ran out of things to do with everybody, or at least they didn't know what to do with everybody. And you had Christine getting married and pregnant and all this going on, and Dan's character totally changing, and the Phil Foundation, all this stuff. Yeah. Harry's hair getting increasingly longer.
Wearing glasses.
Yes.
Yeah, he got more hair as like Christine got less hair.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Dan got more hair too.
Yeah.
But it worked better on him.
Yeah. Bull pretty much stayed the same.
Yes.
Like Roz went from like more of like kind of a Jerry curl kind of thing to, more just regular haircut towards the end. Probably the most consistent was Mac.
Yes.
Which is appropriate, befitting the character.
Right. Certainly in hair, and facial hair.
Yeah.
His wardrobe changed slightly on the episode where he became a millionaire.
Yes, and I just watched that one actually too, and it is a great episode.
Yeah.
But I do believe when I mentioned something about like a later season episode, I believe you expressed trepidation just by seeing the thumbnail and seeing Harry's hair.
Yes.
You didn't really want to go there, and I couldn't blame you.
Yeah.
You knew it didn't bode well.
Honestly, I had trouble with his hair in some of the early seasons too. It just kept like the second season. It's like it keeps changing.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. There's only so much you can do.
Well, it was a metaphor for the show. Much as the show is trying to find its way, Harry's hair was trying to find its way.
And Christine's hair until about the middle of season 5 is very much of its time.
Yes, it's epic.
It's epic.
It's classic 80s hair.
Yeah.
And what she's wearing and everything. I mean, it's funny that the show, does it kind of surprise you that the show lasts until like 1992?
Yes.
In a way, because it's so 80s.
Yeah.
And again, it's kind of easy to forget, at least for me, it's easy to forget those last, couple seasons. And obviously you can just not watch them.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm speculating that maybe people don't forget those last few seasons, but yeah, it's so of its time with the 1980s, just so much about it. It looks like an 80s show in many ways.
It's grimy New York.
Mm-hmm.
And and there are lots of references, of course, but the clothing is very 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, even Harry's sort of retro 40s look at somehow 80s.
Yeah. And I love that setting too. I think it's a great idea for a sitcom.
Yeah.
And we don't like to always pit shows against each other until the baddies here.
Right.
But, if you were to ask me, do you want to watch like 10 episodes of Barney Miller, 10 episodes of Night Court? I would pick 10 episodes of Night Court. I just think Night Court, I enjoy the show more. I think just think it's funnier to me.
Yeah.
I can understand why people like Barney Miller and I respect it. But to me, Night Court hits with me. And part of it is, watching it a lot when I was a kid and having that sort of affection for it. But to me, Night Court's just a funnier show. When at its best, it's to me, it's much funnier.
I wonder if there's a way to watch like an episode of Barney Miller and the one of Night Court as if it were a single episode of Law and Order. Because I feel like they're the same universe.
Yeah.
I mean, even though they're different studios and things, and networks, but I just...
Well, and I believe the same guy did the theme song for both shows.
Yes.
Jack Elliott did both theme songs.
Right.
Hey, if both shows share a theme song composer, to me, that links them, right?
Yeah.
That's enough to put them in the same universe.
I think so, right.
As far as we're concerned. Greatest American Hero and Hill Street Blues, totally
universe.
The same universe.
Yeah. But great theme song.
Yeah, Night Court, yes.
I loved watching episodes and just watching this on, watching it, making sure to do something fun with my hands when the wood blocks, the wood sticks click.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And it is kind of reminiscent of those Barney Miller credits too. Just the way the characters are sort of, you see them with like a freeze frame and even like the font of the, the names and stuff. It's just, it's good. It sets you up for a good half hour or so of television.
And even some of those images of the freeze frames and stuff, or right before the freeze frames, were like burned in my...
Yeah.
Like the Harry running his fingers on the...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Whatever you call it. What does a judge sit behind?
The bench?
The bench, yeah.
Yes.
I've watched a lot of episodes recently.
Yes, and
my brain
this is the first episode of season 11. We're still
remembering common words.
We're kind of describing things that from a show that we have a fondness for. Just like little things like this. Everything adds up. Mike, did you watch a lot of Night Court back when it was first on?
I did. I think in the sort of the maybe season 3 on. Like I don't remember those last. I remember at some point maybe tuning out in those last, like it getting too complicated.
Yeah,
pregnancies and I don't know what something wasn't something going on with Harry and Christine in those later seasons. And
Christine and Dan even.
Oh, Christine, yeah.
Which is that's no. They never should have done that. No. Gone through. I seem to remember more. They were
vying to marry her or something. Like, to be the parent.
Yeah, and I think there was an early episode where they were both. Well, there's a couple of episodes. It seems like where Harry and Dan are competing for the same woman, and there's one where it's not Christine.
There's one where it's Celia Ward.
Yeah,
her friend. Yeah, and doesn't Bull somehow win?
Yeah, and really you can't blame two guys for going after Celia Ward. No. But
in 1980,
8
or whatever that was. Yeah.
I seem to remember like in those early 90s, like my exposure to Night Court would have been mostly like seeing promos for it during the Thursday night shows.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think maybe a movement might have disrupted my watching too.
Yeah. Well, do you know? I guess we can get into that, but just while I'm thinking of it, so when Night Court moved to Wednesday nights, do you know offhand what show replaced it at first on the Thursday night lineup on NBC?
Dear John.
It was Dear John. Yes. Very good. I've been asked about Dear John, and folks, again, if that show if they drop that on, like, I think it would be Paramount Plus.
Yeah.
We'll find a way to do. We're doing it.
Yeah.
Yes. We definitely, it's on our radar, believe me. But yeah, so you did watch it when it was on.
Yeah. And definitely like the Roz period is my, that's the period I happen to be watching the most. But
yeah.
And so whenever I even now, especially see those first 2 seasons, it's weird to me because the cast is changing so much. Mm-hmm. I just don't know it as well.
Yeah. And I think I can remember like in reruns, kind of like when it was one of those episodes being almost a little disappointed at first.
Yeah.
But when I started watching them, and honestly, I think we were pretty locked in on this for a while. And I started watching just like more slowly, like a long time ago, just going through an order. And I realized, you know what? The first couple seasons are pretty good.
Yeah.
I think there's a big misconception that, the show didn't get good, quote unquote, until like that 4th season, or especially like when Marky Post joins.
Right.
But I think there's a lot in the first couple seasons too.
Yeah. I think we were talking about the very first episode. I mean, it has all the elements that you think of Night Court.
Yeah.
The characters aren't fleshed out yet, but Harry is.
Yeah.
It's got the broad comedy, and it's got the more sentimental aspects, and it's the show. It just took a while to find the full cast that they wanted, but it's good. And I love Mac, but I think the original clerk is a fine character, and there's some mystery around why she was quote unquote asked to leave. But
yes, apparently her side, Karen Austin, is that she had a medical condition. I think it was Bell's palsy or something.
Yeah.
And they basically fired her, which is kind of a shame if that's true.
Tom Reeder indicated she might have been a little difficult to work with.
Really? Oh.
In not just, I don't know, he was vague about it, but he said difficult beyond unacceptable.
Well, here's the thing too, is like looking at the show, like did Harry need a romantic interest? No. But yet the show seemed to be from the beginning determined to find somebody.
Yeah.
And it's not really appropriate for him to have a romantic interest with a clerk. Is almost even worse than the I guess they're both pretty bad.
I mean,
the clerk is a subordinate and the defense attorney is.
I mean, she's sort of a subordinate too.
Yeah, and she's arguing cases before him, so that's even
ethically. At least in I guess near the end of season 4, he loses his job, and Christine gets a job as a judge, and they actually express that they have these feelings. But then, as soon as he gets his job back in the beginning of season 5, they're like, "Well, we can't do this."
Well, that's good.
Or he gets his job back, and then she's like, "I don't want to be a judge." So once she's back in that position, they know.
Yeah.
So they do treat it that way.
That's a more mature way of acting as adults.
Right. And I mean, of course, people in workplace do sometimes get attracted to each other. And on a workplace show, I think it just is practical if you're going to have romance that's how it's going to be. Because otherwise you're bringing a character who's not, you have to keep bringing from outside and figuring out ways for them to be there. And even though his court is very open to people just barging in.
Yes. Which, and I would have accepted that. And they did do that with other characters later, I think.
Well, like Mac's wife comes and goes.
Right.
But,
because like they all get together in the cafeteria too. That would be a fine place for somebody to just drop off a lunch or something.
Right. Yeah.
But one thing on a podcast of Ian's, actually, he made a point. I think he said that Ellen Foley, Marky Post's predecessor, actually had better chemistry with Harry.
He said it to Ellen Foley.
Yeah, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
But I think he's right on that. Actually, I don't think I mean, if something happened organically, that's fine. And I think they didn't force it right away. But yeah, Harry and Christine, it just didn't need to happen. And I think a lot of fans wanted it to happen. And I think they were disappointed when it didn't, but not me.
Yeah, I mean, just wasn't a show where that to me was the primary thing. I mean, it's about work. It's like Cheers. It makes more sense for that kind of stuff to happen, just because it's work, but it's also sort of it's a bar. I don't know. There's something different about it. It's sort of where they are. It's their hangout.
Right.
Yeah, it just seems unnecessary. And of course, Dan is not looking for romance.
No. And if you remember, like in Barney Miller, when it started out, there was more of you saw his home life more, and then they just got away from it. Like, we don't need that. And, I think you could have had it like off. And later they had Harry, was it Mary Carteret from Three's a Crowd? They got married or something, or had a long-term relationship on the show. But so I'm not against, having feelings and things like that on Night Court. But for me, Night Court was best when it was more zany. And some of Lori was watching some of the shows with me, and she really was turned off by the maudlin aspect of some of the episodes.
Yeah.
And the show did have a tendency sometimes to slow things down and have real overly sentimental to me moments that don't quite work in the middle of an otherwise broad comedy show. And I think there's a way to do that, but I think that's where the show really kind of went off the rails sometimes. Even in its prime, I didn't care for a lot of that.
So I admire them for trying, or as they said back in my creative writing class, risking sentimentality.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, a lot of times it doesn't work, and sometimes it does. Sometimes it's fine. Or it's a nice. Yeah, there's there's one where Roz and Dan get stuck on an elevator.
Of course.
And he sort of he's freaking out in funny ways, but then it turns out he had got stuck in a pipe or something when he was a kid, so he has some claustrophobia, and she takes care of him. And then I feel and then it's a little secret that he was vulnerable with her, and she was vulnerable because, of course, she's very has a very tough exterior, and they're both just sort of well, don't tell me.
Right.
And then you feel like, okay, that's there somewhere underneath everything, but that was okay. But then there's which I refuse to watch, of course, the Leon episodes.
Yeah.
Despite you saying there was actually good stuff in them, I couldn't bring myself to do it after publicly calling him out on this show.
Yes. It seems a little forced. It's like, okay, let's give Harry this side. And it's okay, but and I think there's probably mixed feelings about Harry Anderson in general. Mm-hmm. I think he's great on this show, and I always liked him. On Cheers, Harry the Hat, he's great on Saturday Night Live and everything. But he does have an acting style where he has a hangdog expression he gives a lot of times, and not even just in sentimental moments, but when he's trying to make a point or something like that. And some of those Leon episodes bring out the worst in that, and yeah, to me, a lot of times, I'm not one of those people that thinks every sitcom can't be Marx Brothers for 30 minutes or whatever. It's okay to slow things down, but I think a lot of those scenes, it would go on too long. Like, one that comes to mind is they had a hurricane and a bunch of pregnancies, pregnant women, and they wind up giving birth to different people. And Pam Greer's in that episode, which I forgot about. Yeah, and
bonds with Dan.
Yes, it's a 2-part episode, and it has little moments, and they're fine. But then at the end, Harry gives a little monologue. Like, Art has brought in a makeshift, a cross, essentially, with a basketball hoop on it or whatever. And Harry gives this long monologue. It's probably only a couple minutes, but it seems to go on more, and he's kind of just speaking to God, which people did a lot, actually, in the courtroom. Now that I think about it, by themselves. But he gives this long thing and then punctuates. He's talking about the things that you've given us, he's rattling off all these great people, Newton and Robert Pine or something, all these great people. And he goes, and Larry Bird, he pulls out a basketball and sinks the basket. And that's supposed to be but it's nah, that didn't quite negate
It was a good shot, though.
The last couple. Yeah, it was good for him, yeah. You remember the Greatest Sports Legends where Tom Seaver interviewed Harry Anderson? Mm-hmm. they shot jump shots together?
Yeah. It's all about sleight of hand. Yeah, he actually had Larry Bird in the bushes. That's how he would do it.
Yes.
He would distract you with some razzle-dazzle, and then Larry Bird.
He was so crafty.
Yeah.
But I do love Harry Anderson, though. And actually, one thing that I've been thinking of sometimes is I don't know if there's enough nonsense from Harry during the show. It seems like you can go through long stretches where he's actually being pretty normal, and I'd like to see a little bit more of that. Which is why, in the episode we're going to talk about today, and we will talk about it eventually.
Yes,
he comes in all chipper and kind of okay, this is the Harry, he's really engaged and being kind of goofy, but in an amiable way. I don't. And I actually like it when he does magic and pranks and stuff like that. I mean, that's kind of distinguishes him a little bit. And I think sometimes I like it when they find even little ways to do that just with the run-of-the-mill cases, because it makes sense that he would want to keep things lively for himself, and make things interesting. Kind of like we were talking about at the beginning of this episode, like, how would I make being a judge fun? Because that's the important thing, of course, about the judiciary.
Right, but there is a lot of talk about him being so wacky and everything, and then he's quite often not that way.
Right. It's like every now and then there'll be an episode where it's a big plot point, and then they play it up. And then the rest of the time, like, you don't necessarily see it. And, granted, we're not seeing all 8 hours of the night court shift.
Or however many hours there are. There's a question there.
Yeah.
What is this shift? What?
I guess I thought it was generally like 4 to midnight or something.
Okay.
So, like, not necessarily.
But sometimes it seems to go later, and sometimes it seems like they're done at 10. And and like even this, like they're staying till midnight in this episode. But is that only because they have so many maybe it's, and are they in the court the whole time?
Right.
Because Dan and Christine have to do, they have to prep and stuff.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
When are they doing that?
Yeah. You never see them like consulting with their clients ahead of time.
No.
Like very rarely.
They're just like looking at files.
Yeah.
Like, they say this and this.
Yeah.
Did someone else prep that? And
yeah.
Just, well.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question.
There are a lot of questions if you think about that too much. But since I barely understand how, not having been around the courts.
Yeah.
Really all the processes, we ask questions about Perry Mason, like what, why is this? Like, I mean, it's like the Perry Mason, that hearing seems like the night court part of it.
Yeah.
But that's not happening here. It's just like misdemeanors and stuff.
I found an interesting article from like 1972 or something, I think, from the New York Times about sort of making it sound like that the night court was being expanded, like the actual night court in New York City, and why it was and stuff, and how there was a big overflow of cases. And it was kind of like to clear out, because otherwise the system would they wouldn't be able to get anything done.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the night court as a concept had been around for years before, but it seemed like from like the 1970s for about like 40 years or whatever, it was like a real big thing, especially like in Manhattan, So, I think it's a great premise for a comedy show. And there was that show with, was it called like Sirotka's Court or something like that, with like Michael Constantine, I think. Didn't last very long. It was a show in the 1970s that I think had a similar premise. I don't think it's really any episodes are around, but it's come up on I think on our web. I think I mentioned it before in the group or on the webpage, but
yes.
But that was, good 6 or 7 years, I think, before Night Court, original Night Court Prime.
Yeah.
And this might be a good place to mention this. This is kind of an interesting oddity I found. So we were talking about like how the show started, and the show first premiered like in January 1984. Okay, like so mid-season, right? And then I happen to have the TV Guide 1984 fall preview. Well, I happen to have it. I've got them all, of course. Yeah. But it's listed in the fall preview as the early starters. Okay, so what shows that are already been underway.
Okay.
So remember, it premiered in January. It already run like multiple episodes, right?
Yeah.
And we've seen those. Okay. Now, what's interesting is they're giving like a description of it, and they have a picture with Bull and Selma Diamond, and Harry. And here's how it starts. No offense, Judge Wapner. This is the description TV Guide writes up. No offense, Judge Wapner, but if we must go to court, let it be this one. The judge is a doll. The defense attorney, Shelley Hack, is a dish. The assistant DA, John Larroquette, is a put-down artist. The court clerk, Charlie Robinson, is a tough guy. The court matron, Selma Diamond, is a character. And then there's the bailiff, Bull Shannon, Richard Mole, and then it talks a little bit more. So they've already moved on. So I guess it's, but the Shelley Hack reference is weird.
Well, that came up, I think, in the Ellen Foley episode of Ian's podcast, that they, for season 2, I mean, there are two weird things, but one of them was that they filmed an episode with her, and then it didn't work out for some reason. And then they refilmed that with a different actress. And that episode appears in the middle of season 2, after they've already introduced Ellen Foley's character. And then the other weird thing is that for the first episode of season 2, Marky Post is there as Christine. Eugene Roach is there as her dad. And then she was still on the Fall Guy. So they waited a year and brought her back.
Yeah.
And to their credit, the same character and everything. And even mentioned, I was here one day last year.
Right. But why, for an unaired episode, why is TV Guide counting Shelley Hack
they must have seen it
as a member of the cast for an unaired episode? And this is in fall 1984, after the first season had already aired.
I guess that was the information they had.
Yeah. Well,
it's going to be Shelley Hack.
Here's an idea, folks. But they'd already should have already known that it wasn't, though, because they had like multiple seasons in the. I'm just saying that if they actually watched the show, they would have known that Shelley Hack wasn't part of the cast at that point.
But it hadn't happened. This is the fall preview.
But the fall preview for 1984,
which
so it's coming out in September.
Season 2. This is season 2,
right? But the show had premiered in January 1984.
Yeah, but the Shelley Hack.
Oh, so you're saying the Shelley Hack would have been the beginning of season 2? Okay,
yes.
okay, right, all right, that's right. Okay,
Right.
All right. Oh, okay.
Because Paula Kelly was in.
That's right. The
season 1.
defense. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I withdraw my criticism, TV Guide.
Yes. But there are these weird these casting things that are like I like Ellen Foley, and I was like reading about her. I'm like, wow, she might be the most interesting cast member.
Mm-hmm.
Just as her career outside of it. I mean, she sang on Paradise. What was it?
Oh yeah,
the
Paradise by the Dashboard.
Yeah, the Meatloaf song, but not in the video. And she worked with members of the Clash and all this stuff, and Mick Ronson from David Bowie's band.
Right.
Was on some other show, like a variety show, right? Or something.
Yeah, I don't remember which.
Something with three women. I forget. But then I read about Selma Diamond, Florence Halep.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, they're pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, Selma Diamond. I get. Carl Reiner said she was the basis for Rosemary's character in the Dick Van Dyke Show, and she was a comedy writer and a humorist, cartoonist, and an actress. And Florence Halep started in radio when she was 7.
Yeah, and they're both great.
Yeah,
I love those characters, and it's amazing. Like I think season 3 in particular is really good.
Yeah,
that's with Florence Halep right before Roz, and they have pretty much everything's clicking. I think in season 3 pretty well. There's a lot of really funny episodes, and Selma Diamond is missed, but they did there was a delicate thing to do to actually quote unquote replace her.
Yeah,
and they did it, and it's funny because they did acknowledge Selma.
Right,
the character's death.
And when we were talking about the sentimentality, I think there are a few places where Bull is actually a very effective character in those situations. Like it reminded me of, in a way, like Big Bird on Sesame Street.
Yeah,
like Bull cries.
That's
like,
really,
and I mean he's really worked up when they're want to replace. So at the beginning of that season, like he's very distraught.
That's
about
really
things,
good.
and in a real way. And I mean he does yell at one point in a kind of terrifying way, but it's not because there's the funny thing where he'll walk out of the room and then start sobbing, like really loudly.
Yeah,
the building shakes and things. But and then I think there's a little bit of that when she's gone.
Yeah, well,
or the episode where she's going to retire.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
which by that episode made no sense.
Yeah,
like it was this very intense emotional thing, and like she got to be really serious. At the end, it all worked out, and she was back.
Right, like basically like in a snap of a finger, like the administrative incompetence of plus a little magic, I guess, at the end.
Right.
And at the beginning of the 4th season, because I watched the first couple of, and Harry just makes kind of a passing reference to losing Florence.
Right.
But they don't really, understandably, they don't do a whole episode about that. But
yeah,
they moved on and went to Marcia Warfield.
Right. Yeah.
Who's considerably younger.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was a heck of a thing.
I mean, Selma Diamond in particular, like that character, especially in the first season, is very much like we talked about with Carla and Cheers, like the hit and run sort of.
Yes.
Kind of. She'll just be walking down the hall and make a pithy comment.
Yeah.
Take a puff of her cigarette.
Yeah.
Walk off camera.
Right.
I guess in the second season they gave her at least 1 or 2 episodes a little more focused on her.
Yeah. There was like a love interest, even the guy.
Yeah, Bernie.
That was hitting on her. And it seemed like they made more of an effort with Florence to kind of develop that as a character, like having her be like in a motorcycle gang and things like that.
Yes.
But the relationship they had with Bull was great. And I think you're right. And I do think like the sentimentality works very well with that particular character. And Bull was great. I mean, the cast was so good in this, and he was very effective.
Yeah, I guess he has a complex relationship with that character. But
yeah, I don't quite know what's going on there, but he does seem like conspicuous by his absence, like in discussions and talk of the show, and when they talk about each other, it seems like even a lot. I mean, even historically, it seems like in the last like 20 years, even.
Yeah, I guess he felt typecast.
Well, he probably was.
Yeah,
but I mean, before. What was he in before this? Like, what was the movie? Like, You're the Hunter from the Future or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't want to say what do you expect.
Right. Yeah. From the outside, it seems like a gift.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he's a very specific physical type.
Right. I get the impression that, which would be sad if true, that it's not just after the show, but he didn't always enjoy working on the show itself, which would be kind of a shame.
Yeah.
Because this is the kind of thing with this ensemble, you kind of want them like Cheers. You want to think that they all get together, that they enjoy each other's company and they swap stories and would get drunk on the last episode.
Yeah.
Rap party or whatever, but maybe that's not the case.
You know who stood out to me? This is going to sound bizarre to say it that way, but Dan Larkin. I'd either forgotten or not appreciated like how good he is.
Yeah.
At so many different things.
Right.
Like the physical comedy especially really stood out. He's just always, doing these really broad kind of thing, like John Ritter type things. I mean, not the same, but that just knowing how to use, because he's tall. I mean, Harry Anderson's tall. They're all tall.
That's
guys.
Right.
And,
That's right.
But using all of that and using his voice, which is a great voice, and able to usually, like, I think Tom Reeder said on Ian's podcast, he was completely happy to play the jerk. Like a lot of actors are like, I don't want to be unlikable and stuff.
Yeah.
He totally embraced that. But on some occasions, he got to let down his guard. Has dramatic chops, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Was good at that. And just, I think probably as a kid, because was unlikable, he had a little bit of that thing. Go away, heat. Sometimes. And plus I didn't get as much of some what he was saying.
Right.
Went over my head, but because I mean, they're all good. So I just want to. I get why he won some Emmys.
Yeah, you made a great point there in that, like, his physical size, but he played the character more like he more stooged. Like for example, it's funny because there's scenes with him and Bull. Bull just seems bigger, although it's kind of funny he's not that much taller.
Right.
But Dan plays it smaller when he has to, and he could have been more of a kind of a nasty bully. But because he has that sort of like stooging vulnerability, despite his size, he comes off as like, you can laugh at him even when he's doing like, totally crude things or whatever, but it's not like physically menacing, like it could have been.
Yeah, and the character is pretty complex within the confines of a sitcom. But I mean, he is crude, he's arrogant, and yet totally self-loathing.
Yeah.
He's, which apparently is part of his sex life too. Yeah. And but he also knows all this stuff about himself.
Right.
Like Sam Malone is not very self-aware, but he's completely he's like, oh yeah, I know I'm a suck up. I know I'm a heel. I know I'm a pervert.
Yeah, but it's not as predatory as it could have been.
Yeah. And then every now and again they do show that thing underneath, and you're like, oh, okay. Like, I don't know if you saw the one where he was in a coma.
No,
it's like a 2-part one where like he went in for like an ulcer surgery, and he's sitting in his hospital bed smoking a cigar, and then he has the surgery, and then this woman Sheila, who's on a few episodes, who, like, he's definitely he's not driving that train. And she comes in and they have sex in the hospital room, and then it puts him in a coma. Then he wakes up and, he's still acting out like, I'm just, and then he has like this really serious talk with Harry about it. And he's basically saying, well, I'm alone. He lets it all down. Like, oh, all this is a show because I'm going to die alone, all this stuff. And,
right.
I think that makes it more interesting. I'm glad they didn't show that a lot, but it makes it easier to deal with some of the other stuff.
Right.
And plus, of course, he almost always loses.
Yeah. And I like him when he's self-absorbed but smart. Like, he's smart, but he can't help himself. Yeah. So, like, those base instincts of him, like, often work against him because, he just can't do any better a lot of times. But like you said, he knows it, and him fighting against it sometimes makes for good comedy, too.
Yeah. Or like if he's really sucking up and Harry says something, yes, I'm sorry, sir.
Yes.
Like,
right. Even within a scene, he could be doing totally stuff without, but he shows it by, like, just like the way he reacts, like his little high pitched like reactions and stuff, and just like facial expressions and the timing sometimes. Like somebody will say something and something's coming, but the pause, and then he says it like in a very dry way, and with a little eye movement and stuff. Like little things. He's great to watch. Let me ask you this though. So he won 4 Emmys in a row.
Yes.
And then asked that his name be withdrawn from consideration.
Yeah.
Now, I think I'm not. I think I read something at the time where he was kind of explaining it, but doesn't that seem kind of like I don't know. What do you think about that move?
Well, I read an archived AV Club thing he did.
Okay.
Where they go through a bunch of roles, and he talked about that, and he said part of it had to do with, I think he just felt like the work wasn't as good. And it was at the point where those last few seasons where he felt like, well, the time has passed for this.
Right.
So it seemed less like, oh, I'm going to win. So
yeah.
Now, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to allow himself to be nominated for baddies.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to, do we let people? I don't know if the committee really takes that into consideration.
I mean, we haven't in the past, but
no.
If he contacted us, well.
Boy, I hadn't thought that far ahead, but geez, I guess that's something we're going to have to look into. I do remember reading something where it it was after the fact, and he said something like, well, making it sound like he had his eye on future careers or future roles, and he kind of wanted to distance himself from the character a little bit. So he was basically saying, well, it's kind of selfish, really, but that could be just kind of self-deprecation, too. I'm not saying one way or the other. I just see, like, even at the time, it seemed almost like a touch of like a humble brag kind of thing, as people would say now. It just seems kind of weird, but, I don't know offhand who was the beneficiary of him removing himself from consideration, but congratulations to him, whoever he was.
I mean, I guess he could have done it without making a big deal out of it.
Yeah.
Because you still have to, they have to submit something. They have to submit
that,
themselves, right?
That's
so he could have just not submit.
Right.
Or unless the show was submitting it on his behalf.
Yeah. I think that's something that I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think he even mentioned that, like, he said something like he decided not to submit, because I'd forgotten that it's kind of an active process where you actually submit what you think is your best work.
Right.
It just, I remember at the time thinking too, it seemed like an odd thing that it was as public as it was.
Yeah.
But, this people would have wondered, how dare you not nominate Dan Fielding, or Fielding, or John Larroquette snubbed by the Emmys.
This week on Entertainment Tonight.
While we're going around the horn, should we talk a little bit about Charlie Robinson, Mac?
Our awesome character.
Great character, and boy, he seemed like a great guy too, like just in real life, and just seemed like to have a blast. But here's one thing I love about Mac, and I like, for one thing, I like it with Mac gets like upset. Mm-hmm. Like the episode, maybe it was one of the ones we've already mentioned, where Quan Lee's parents or family comes over and lives with him, and they totally trash everything, and his like TV gets damaged, and at one point he just yells, "You broke my TV!" And he's just like so upset, and I love those moments, and like the rest of the character's general demeanor makes those moments more effective. But one thing I like about Mac is, like, Harry's kind of got that sort of condescending in a different way, but Mac's got that thing where he's like, "Oh, I don't," he just like talks to everybody like they're 5 years old, I really enjoy that for some reason. A lot of times, just like, when he's like laying down like a bunch of files without looking at anybody directly in the eye, he does that very well, and I kind of enjoy that. So props to him.
Yeah, and I mean, I like in general, he's the sane person.
Yeah,
but then he usually his highlight episodes, he loses his mind.
Yes.
Like Quan Yi says she's pregnant, and he goes on a bender in a cowboy bar and is like singing. The one where he finally, his grandfather dies and he inherits $2 million. That classic sitcom thing of like doing a complete 180 personality change.
I just love his like entrance into the cafeteria where there's a fanfare playing and like a live
and he's
trumpet
money around.
The Quan Lee character used to annoy me because I just thought it was a total like stereotype and just wasn't interested. But now that I'm kind of rewatching these now, I kind of respect it and like the situation. And it's something interesting for Mac, and I kind of respect more what she's doing and everything. So now I'm fine with the character.
Yeah,
just
and they're totally opposite.
Yeah,
like she just spends money.
Right. In his rant in the Millions episode, where he like lists all these things that he wants to happen to her after she says, she's rattling off all the things she did. Well, it's my fault, and it's my, and I'm the one that canceled our liability insurance, in the restaurant they have, which was put in this big situation. He just rattles off all these horrible things, like in big detail, he wants to happen to her, which was kind of unusual actually for him to be that intense about it. But he felt bad about it later. So Charlie Robinson, yes, great.
Yes. Great. And he's a man not afraid to tuck his tie into his pants.
Yeah. Good point there. Yes.
His knit tie.
Yeah. And then, Marsha Warfield, she doesn't have a lot to do in the episode we're going to talk about, which is kind of unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed what she did too. I mean, she had that deadpan thing and blended in pretty quickly. You can tell, like in some of those early episodes, and that they haven't quite figured it out yet. But eventually, she becomes like an essential part of the group.
Yeah, and just like the others, she's a sort of caretaker for Bull.
Yeah. Now, it does seem like they had multiple episodes. Maybe it was only 2 or 3. But as I was kind of going through episode descriptions, it seemed like they might have gone back to the well one too many time of her going to some kind of like therapy group to deal with anger management or some kind of other issue,
Yeah. I saw a description one. I'm like, I'm not going to watch this because it's like she goes to an anger management group and ends up disarming a boy or something. I'm like, I know the tone of this one.
Right.
It's not funny. And I was reading she came out in 2017 because her mom to do it publicly. Like everybody knew, but if that had happened on a show in the 80s, like Night Court would have been a good candidate for that. to just have her character be that, you know.
Yeah.
I could see them doing that.
They could have done a lot with that, actually, now that I think about it.
And I felt there was one episode, an episode where she and Christine go to a bar, and like everyone there was a woman. I'm like, wait, what? Then it turned out it was like a male. Yeah. There was a male strip show.
Ladies' night.
Yeah, it was late. That's the name of the episode. Yeah. And I was like, oh, they doing this? And I hadn't even read that about her yet. I was just like, oh, that would be interesting, but no.
Speaking of Christine, I think Marky Post is great, and she was not part of the holy trinity of brunettes that we've mentioned on the show many times, but she was an attractive woman. But I really enjoy her performances. And actually, one thing, kind of rewatching and seeing a bunch of episodes, that I think maybe the show didn't quite do her justice. And it's kind of like that thing of like, maybe it's just a cliche, but like when they have an attractive woman, a lot of times shows like sitcoms like this have problems figuring out what to do with her. And I think they were a little mean to her. I think they went out of their way to try to make her seem less than perfect. Yeah. Like probably thinking, oh, a lot of people are going to resent her if she's like two. So they made her a goody two shoes, which is fine. And they play up on that. But it just seems sometimes they kind of make her character look foolish. And even in the early episodes, like Harry is particularly like mean to her early on. And that didn't necessarily go away. It seemed like a lot of the characters don't take her seriously and everything. And I don't know. I think they could have made her character a little bit better, is just what I'm saying. I don't know if they entirely did her justice.
I don't know if you know, but she had a little dent. Did you see that episode? It's another Yakov episode. Harry points out that she has like a little divot. Or something.
And then she,
Yes, the whole episode.
That whole thing where she's, yeah. It's like giving her some kind, or there's, another episode I saw recently where her hair is all messed up. And like people are commenting on it, oh, what happened to your hair? Because her hairstylist had like some kind of incident or something like that. Yeah. It's like, that's kind of standard thing, is like giving some kind of flaw to make fun of. But I would have liked to have seen a little bit more, and maybe there's some that I just haven't seen yet, but I'd like to see a little bit more of her being, a little bit more competent in general. I mean, she's a competent attorney, but I just think maybe they went to that a little bit too much, because that was kind of her, it just seemed like they made that her big character trait, as being like insecure and stuff like that, and having flaws and stuff when they didn't necessarily need to do that. But she's great on the show. Yeah.
I can't imagine the show with it. Wait,
no. I mean, for many people, it didn't become Night Court until she was part of the regular cast.
I mean, I think that's felt weird watching those other episodes.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, I can see that.
But yeah. I like her. I mean, like some of the stuff is like all the Princess Diana stuff seems bizarre sometimes. But I like it when, Eugene Roach turns up as her dad.
Yeah.
That's fun. And, she does stand up for herself a lot. Like, that Ladies' Night, it's one of those sitcom things where she acts all out of character. Mm-hmm. Thinks she was drunk and then finds out she wasn't drunk.
Yeah.
She's just being herself.
I kind of wonder if maybe it's one of those things sometimes where, like, outside the courtroom, she actually has things a lot more together but like inside the courtroom, her peers don't treat her with as much respect as they should.
Right. It's a little bit of a boys' club.
Yeah.
That's why she wanted to bond with Ross.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. You might want to watch. Actually, let me amend that. You should watch the season 9 episode where the two of them go to Christine's therapy group together.
Christine and Ross.
Yes.
Do they stop a bank robbery?
No, nothing that dramatic.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. We'll see.
I just want you to watch some more season 9 episodes because I did.
I mean, I had the goal of watching the series finale.
Yeah.
The 2-part series finale, but it didn't happen.
Yeah. And
and part of what happened, so I started watching the season 7 episode with Yakov, and as I mentioned, that was a little hard to deal with. I mean, I only have 10 minutes left. And then I watched an episode of the new version, and I was a little, disappointed with that.
Well, the original series was so precarious, and to give a little bit of benefit of the doubt, I guess NBC was kind of wishy-washy about renewing it. So multiple times they expected it would be the end of the season. And then it seemed like even at the end of the 9th season, it wasn't until like the very end that they realized that the show wasn't going to get a renewal. So they really didn't have a lot of chance to wrap things up. And like at the beginning of one season, they had to like undo a lot of stuff that they had done the previous season. So it wasn't ideal circumstances. But you and I were talking about how like there was a 2-part finale, and then there was one more episode that aired like the week after the 2-part finale, which seems, talk about anticlimactic.
That's like classic network.
Yeah. But just like
business. What
a sad way for, a once great show to end.
Yeah. Even like going into season 6, I didn't watch these episodes, but there's a thing where like Dan gets called up for the Army Reserves.
Yes.
Like, I don't know, is it a plane crash or something? I think he's dead and everything.
Yeah.
I'm just like reading those descriptions. Like, this seems like too much.
Yeah.
And then, you watch an episode after then, as far as I could tell, that didn't happen.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I like some of the surreal touches within an episode, but as far as like these more surreal, like big, larger storylines, you know, and plot lines, those didn't work so well, I thought.
Right.
But I did like it. Like sometimes you'd have gags, like with, you know, like somebody going through like a wall or something,
Yes.
leaving like a cartoon outline. You know, that usually works very well in the show.
Right. Or just some completely, or it's like the ventriloquist dummy that seemed to be alive.
Right.
Or one with like this guy invented like an Alexa basically, or this box, and it was talking to people and analyzing their behavior, you know, but from a completely logical point of view.
Yes. And some of the stuff with the pranks and things like that would be like, you know, kind of ridiculous, but it works. It's good to have a little magic and pranks every now and then.
Okay, that's Night Court.
Yeah.
Adjourned. I guess we should get into this episode.
I think we should. Yeah. So the episode that Ian suggested was Another Day in the Life from season 5.
I believe it's his favorite episode.
Yes. A sequel to A Day in the Life, which I think A Day in the Life, the first one was in the 4th season, I believe. So this episode premiered February 18th, 1988 on a Thursday. Now, since this is season 5 we're talking about, let me say real quick here. This is something I got to get off my chest, Mike. An early South Park episode. I don't know if you remember this one. The one where they went to the planetarium, and at a kind of a side thing, Cartman was trying out for a Cheesy Poofs commercial to be a kid actor in a Cheesy Poofs. And there was a jingle, and the jingle went like, I love Cheesy Poofs. You love Cheesy Poofs. If we didn't eat Cheesy Poofs, we'd be lame. So Cartman sneaks off, goes to this audition, and he like does it really theatrical. And he says, you know, if we didn't eat Cheesy Poofs, we'd be lame. And he says, I'm talking Night Court in its 5th season, lame. At the time when I watched that, it was one of the funniest things I had heard in a long time, and I was just, I couldn't stop laughing. However, even at the time, I raised an eyebrow. Now, you got to look at it with a skeptical eye. The 5th season of Night Court is fine.
Yes.
If you had talked about a later season, I can understand, but
the 7th season.
Yes, Night Court in its 5th season is very good.
Yeah,
and this is a great example. So
I feel like they just probably chose a sitcom.
Yes,
and figured the 5th season is when it gets bad.
Yes, and 5th season, maybe they thought it was funnier.
It's scanned.
Yes, and plus they were putting together a lot of these episodes in like 15 minutes.
Right.
But it was very funny, but it doesn't hold up to scrutiny.
Maybe they just don't like Ross.
That could be. It could be. Well, I hope they enjoyed Another Day in the Life because I certainly did. So just to set this up a little bit, I'll try to be quick. So NBC, this is a Thursday night lineup. This is, again, right before Night Court got bumped. So we had Cosby at 8, Different World at 8:30, Cheers at 9, Night Court 9:30, and LA Law at 10. CBS.
Juggernaut.
Yes, that's a big lineup, which is interesting because CBS was showing Tour of Duty, Simon & Simon, and Knots Landing. Tour of Duty wasn't a big ratings hit, but the other two shows were veteran shows, but it wasn't like they were just like giving up, you know, which I think is interesting. ABC had the Winter Olympics on. So this was new programming. And can you imagine? So I think all 3 networks basically had like mostly new programming going on. And the Winter Olympics, had men's figure skating, women's luge, women's downhill skiing. So from Calgary, Canada.
Women's luge.
Yes.
That was my Dan Fielding.
Yes, with the appropriate arch of the eyebrow as well. Very lascivious of you. So that was what else was on, and kind of a big night of TV. I'm just kind of amazed that this premiered against a good episode like this premiered against the Winter Olympics. But NBC didn't care that this time the Olympics could not stop this lineup.
What was Night Court's ratings like?
First season, I think it was a top 10 show, and then I think after this it dropped out of like the top 20, and then beyond that, like the last 3 seasons, it was like way down. It was more of like a middling kind of show.
Wow.
Maybe some ups and downs, but it was never a top 20 show after this. I think it peaked at like in the top 10, and then it was kind of like a solid top 10 show for a couple seasons, and like a top 20 show, and then kind of went out of it.
So it was definitely nothing against the show, but it was benefiting from
yes.
Place.
Oh yeah, totally. And as soon as it got off that Thursday night lineup, the ratings went like way down.
And they probably moved it to Wednesday to be like the anchor of that night, right?
Yeah, you would think, and I think that's part of it, but I think I was looking at what else was on like around that. So it'd be like Quantum Leap, and I think some other another new show, and just it didn't seem like a big lineup. And Night Court was still like airing at like 9:30.
Yeah. So,
it wasn't like they moved it to like 9 or something or 8 to lead off an evening. Like kind of like
that couldn't have been an 8 o'clock show.
Yeah.
I mean, content-wise, I just can't imagine it being before 9.
I think they just wanted to make way for Dear John. But it didn't seem like when NBC moved Frasier
Yeah.
And then like to anchor like Tuesday night. I don't think that's what happened with Night Court. And I'm not quite sure though. Actually, that's something I'm curious about is what went into that decision to move it. But I think they just probably thought, well, it just became less of a priority to them probably.
Yes. So this and there was at least another another Day in the Life episode after. Maybe more than one.
I think there was more than one, but I don't remember those other ones offhand.
Yeah. But it's a sort of a format, a recurring format.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like, you know what it reminds me of?
Bar Wars?
Yes, exactly. It reminds me of Bar Wars. It's a good thing to go back to. So I'm going to watch those other episodes, definitely.
Yeah. So it begins and in the courtroom, and Dan is antsy because Harry is a full minute late. And it turns out he's in a pool with the other DAs to see who can have the most convictions, I guess, in this month. And midnight is the deadline, but it's based on raw tonnage.
Yes.
So based on the weights of the defendants, and the winner gets $2,000. So, and he is as high on a big screen TV.
Yeah.
Understandable. He wants to get things going.
$2,000 would be a good down payment on a big screen TV back then.
Yeah.
So I can't blame him.
It seems like he wouldn't have time for TV, but with all his other activities.
Yeah, maybe unless he had like a high-end VCR, but would he be watching like the daytime soaps on a big screen TV before he goes to work?
Maybe. And Harry shows up, and as you mentioned, he kind of walks in. He introduces it like a game show and calls Bull Pardo. He's in good spirits until he finds out they have 207 files to get through. So on the previous Day in the Life, which they don't mention, they broke a record and they got through 200.
Yeah,
in one night.
And even later, there's a moment with Bull and that makes it seem like they haven't done that before.
Right. And it was weird because on the previous one, he's like, I mean, on a good night, we do like 70, 80.
Yeah.
It's wow.
Yeah, that in itself is pretty impressive.
Yeah. And then one of the defendants comes up, the great Pat Corley.
Yeah.
As Otis Edwards, the old Texas businessman. And he wants to get out by midnight. He's got to get to Japan to sign a $30 million contract. But he got arrested for jumping naked into Lincoln Center Films.
Now, why would you do something like that, Mike?
For $10.
Okay.
Someone told him he couldn't.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't.
Okay, well, that's justifiable then.
Yeah. He can't pass up a bet.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
A sporting man.
But it turns out he's not just lower on the docket. He's number 207. And then we get the first case, which is three nuns named Mo, Lori, and Carla.
Yeah.
Lori, Mo, and Carla. And Dan does a very good Curly
impression. Is the old nyuk, nyuk, nyuk.
Yeah.
And I laughed as soon as I heard their names, so we're off to a good start there.
Right, yeah. And then I really appreciate it. He does that, and then Harry kind of gives him what for. Or he's like, stop that. Be professional. He's like, certainly.
Yes.
And they won't abandon the premises of this orphanage because they've missed some payment, $300,000 in payments on their mortgage. And there's a sleazy banker, played by future Broadway legend Brian Stokes Mitchell.
Yes, and previous Trapper John M.D. regular Brian Stokes Mitchell.
Wow.
What a career he's had, huh?
Yes.
He was on like a surprising amount of like TV before he became like a Broadway superstar, which is, it's kind of amazing really. But yeah, he's very young in this. Even after being on Trapper John for a while, he just looks very young. And just that classic smarmy 80s bad guy, right?
Yeah. And he's good at it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's funny because, I mean, next to him, Dan looks like a saint.
Yeah, that's right.
And, Harry's like, well, if you miss a payment, unfortunately, you're going to have to pay. But Otis Edwards steps up and he's got an idea for a bet. He'll pay off their mortgage if Harry manages to get him out of there by midnight.
Mm-hmm.
And, Harry doesn't have to bet anything. So if he loses the bet, he'll pay this $300,000. And Harry's like, well, yeah, but we have to take the cases in order.
All right. A man of integrity. He's not giving him any unfair advantage. He's just going to get through everything else first.
Of course, Christine's on board to do it for the kids and the nuns. And, Mac and Bull and Roz, they're all on board. And Dan's on board because he does some calculations.
Yes.
He might win that $2,000.
Right.
And then you get, and this was established in the previous episode, you get timestamps throughout, which seems like it's like, okay, this is explaining the hours they work. But again, when did they start?
Yeah.
I mean, 6 to midnight is not 8 hours. That's only 6 hours.
That's true.
Math. I know when a midnight, when you have to start to get 8 hours in a midnight shift.
Yes, you do, yes. More math in season 11, folks.
Yes.
Something to look forward to.
So at 6:17, Harry's giving this angry speech about you can't stand up and wave while you're driving and this and this. And then they cut and that's the Pope.
Yeah.
Pope John Paul.
That was very funny.
That guy was everywhere.
Yeah.
I forgot he was in The Naked Gun.
Yeah, even more than Brian Stokes Mitchell.
Yes. It is that same guy every time.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember him like being on a Tonight Show like a bunch.
Yeah.
Like he kept showing up in the audience.
Well, that's right, yeah. Made quite a career for himself.
Yeah. Like that Saddam Hussein guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why would I put the number 43?
Maybe that was the case number at that point.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah. They've already gotten through 43 cases.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's impossible, which honestly, that doesn't, again, math, it seems like, well, like 43 and they have almost 6 hours to go.
Right. So that would leave, over 160.
Yeah. But
if you're doing 8 hours, you got to average, like 24 over, almost 25 cases an hour.
Yeah. It just seems like they're well on their way.
Right.
Because the next time we check in, it's much later and they're only on like 80 cases.
I mean, plus they started, and killed some time at the beginning, so they cost themselves some time there before they set up this challenge.
I'm honestly back to even them getting 80 done in a night. Based on what we see on the show week in and week out, it seems like they only have the capacity to, because they take so many recesses and have so many other weird interruptions and personal matters going on at the same time.
Right.
They're only getting like 2 cases done a night.
They're not usually built for speed, no.
No. Or just standing around at the bench.
Yeah.
Jawing.
Right.
Something be happening.
Yes. That's what makes this achievement so remarkable.
Yes.
That they could even approach 207.
Right. And the same season, they did the previous episode in season 4, Harry actually got fired for being inefficient. You'd think those 200 cases would...
He should be legend. Yeah. And that was in a situation where everybody would have gone free.
Yes.
Because of so there was real consequences to getting those
cases
mandate. Resolved. Yeah. So he should be pretty much set for life.
Yes.
with that.
Dan's excited, of course, about his possibility of getting the $2,000, but he says if I didn't need a big screen TV, I'd give every penny to those waifs. And then we meet the Klemper family. That's why he's excited, because they add up to 932 pounds.
Yes.
And they attacked a mortician, and really for good reason. The mortician who wanted to put the fun back in funerals.
Yeah.
And put a bumper sticker on their on the casket that said, "I'd rather be breathing." And the deceased was wearing a T-shirt that said, "Yesterday was the last day of the rest of my life." We don't get the outcome of that case. So
No.
I assume that might be a $50 fine and time served.
Time served.
Yes.
This is a great one. The funeral director is great. He's got this interesting delivery and his facial expressions. He stands out and really good use of him. That was a really good case.
He's somehow upbeat yet sleazy.
Yeah.
Very weird. And then it's 8:29, and we have a man charged with selling stolen property in an auction house.
Yeah.
We get a whole thing. Auctioneering. He's trying to plead himself, and he's doing auctioneering.
Yeah. Do I hear?
Yeah.
and Harry's nodding, and shaking his head no until.
Right.
Yeah. That's something you got to see, because that's a hilarious bit too.
Yeah.
I kind of wondered, did they save some of these for an episode like this? Because there are throughout the season, I guess they do have short things like other stuff's going on, and they'll have humorous cases sprinkled throughout. But it does seem like they saved some of their best ideas for this episode. Yeah,
I wonder. Maybe they're just or maybe they had a gag file.
Yeah.
Well, this can't. This isn't going to be more than a minute.
Right.
But let's go back to the gag file.
And maybe it's possible they did, because one thing about Riney, it seems like he was a very hands-on showrunner, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he wrote a lot of the episodes and supervised a lot of it, so it's possible that they, were thinking ahead and knew that they'd do another one. But I guess they needed ideas like this anyways. Any idea they could take and slip it into another episode. But they certainly had a lot of good ones in this one.
It seems like maybe this would be a all writers on hands on deck kind of thing.
Yeah.
Let's just start pitching.
Yeah.
Wacky cases. And there's a bit with Bull holding his breath for 18 minutes in a bet with Otis, who's hornswoggled.
Yes.
And then, how can you hold your breath for 18 minutes? And Bull, Mommy?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Mac, with his endless connections, has heard that another DA has a 960-pound lead.
Yeah.
Yes, he convicted some wrestlers who beat up the spectators. And they're about halfway there in terms of cases. And we get these 3 old ladies who have being charged with running a phone sex service without a license. He kind of knows. They start talking about that. This might go somewhere.
Yeah.
And one of them says, "What bad, whatever her name is."
Oh yeah, Bad Bertha or
Bad Brenda.
Bad Brenda.
Yes. And Dan's like, "You're Bad Brenda."
Yeah.
Even before she said that, they cut to him.
Yeah.
He's like looking around.
Yeah. 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 It comes out pretty much how you'd expect it, but it's done perfectly.
Yes, and they recognize his voice and know all of his fantasies, and then one of them turns to Christine like, "Oh, you must be Christine."
Yeah.
And in 942, we have Mr. DeYoung, who broke into a plumbing supply warehouse, and this is like the Pope one. You get the information, and then they cut to the shot, and he's got a kitchen sink stuck over his head, and like one of his feet is sticking out of the other, like it's a two sink thing. Then he's like, "Prove it."
Yeah.
That one's remanded over to the grand jury.
That never happened to G. Gordon Liddy and his crew. You know this. They weren't that obvious.
They knew how not to get stuck in a sink.
Yes, those plumbers were a little bit more crafty.
Yeah, that was more of like a Three Stooges level plumbing.
That's true. Yes.
And Bull is reassuring the nuns, but as you said, it turns out he has the case count wrong. He's like, "Oh, we can get through 107 cases," and they correct him. Then he just like
there's like a little whistle. And, yeah.
And then the nuns are praying, and the banker's like behind them, all smug. The bottom of his coffee cup falls out. Quietly thank God.
Yes.
For that. Then TV's Marshall Wallace shows up.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
Unexpected in this kind of episode to have. We have Pat Corley.
Right.
Expect another big guest star.
Yeah. Almost unheralded. But good for her.
Yeah.
What a pro. She comes in and she has so much energy, and like she's so good in this one little role.
Yeah.
That it's like, hey, it's cool that they did this. Right. That she did this.
Yeah. And then she had time off from those salad dressing commercials she was doing around then. Yes. Bill Daly.
Right.
But yeah, she is an animal rights activist, and she freed a bunch of lobsters from a lobster tank. One of them almost got in a cab. And then she says, and this is very funny, it really doesn't make any sense, but because she freed live lobsters, but then what she talks about is them getting cooked.
Right.
She says very passionately, "I would like to be lured into a cage, dropped in boiling water, then drenched in butter and laid out on a display case." And there's like a shot of Dan, like a really long pause.
Yes.
Like, "Your place or mine?"
It's a great example of the execution, because
yes.
I think like instead of like calling attention to it with like by focusing and then cutting to him, like he's there the whole time, and that which adds to like the anticipation. Again, you kind of see it coming, but
right.
it's just done so perfectly that it's really funny.
And because he's good, you kind of see the wheels spinning.
Yeah. Like again, like he's acting, but he's active like in everything. You can always see what's going on in his head.
Yeah, and then she gives this big speech which ends with her saying, "There's no difference between love of people and love of animals." And then there's a cow in the corner, like wearing a fedora and a necktie. Yeah. She's like, "With you in a minute, hon." Which that's pretty weird.
Yeah.
Go to 10:15, and there's a barbershop quartet, and they plead guilty in song, which just pleases Harry to no end. He suspends their sentence.
I like that moment of joy there by Harry, just appreciating it and
really everyone's into it.
Yeah.
Barbershop quartet usually in a sitcom is used as a punching bag.
That's a good point. Yeah. Here it's like a nice break from everything and a nice moment of cheer for everyone.
Yeah, and then they walk out singing and tipping their hats.
Yeah, they're just wild about Harry.
Yeah. I forget, they were performing without a license or something. I don't even know what.
I think it was, yeah.
And there's a little scene between Otis and Christine, which could just be like a one-off gag. Turns out it's actually a little more important. But he seems a little taken with her. Says her perfume could get the ticks off a blood hand.
Yes, but he's again, it's not like in a Dan way.
No,
not openly coming. He's just sort of like being that old like.
Polite,
gentlemanly kind of way, like just meaning well. Yeah, this was good, and like you said, it sets up for later. A very efficient script this is, or episode. Even with cramming all these cases in, they have like a moment like this that pays off later.
Yeah, and then there's a little bit where Dan is like checking the weight of one of the defendants that's waiting, and there are 81 cases left now. The nuns are worried. But Christine's like talking up Harry, he won't give up, and you see him and he's giving up, and Max like being like a boxing manager and massaging his shoulders, and the nuns show him pictures of all the orphans, which have big eyes, like Max says, that big eyes, like the kids in paintings in the hotel hallway.
Yeah, if they had only shown him a picture of Leon,
yes,
he would have really snapped to to it.
Right. And of course that works. And then the next case, he gets all gung ho again. In this next case, there's a guy, an assault case, and the guy, he is the victim, the plaintiff, I guess, keeps repeating everything everyone said, like right after they're saying.
It's hilarious. You just have to see.
Yeah.
It's something like I totally, this episode, some of it came back to me as I'd totally forgotten about this particular one, and then when I saw it, like, oh yeah, and this is like one of the best moments I'd seen on the show. It's just a couple minutes, but the whole sequence plays out so well. It's great.
Yeah, and he explains that it's something he just did as a kid, and somehow it's contagious, and then everyone.
Yeah.
Harry's talking, and everyone else is repeating what he said. Like, now cut that out. And then we're at the 11:58, 2 minutes and 2 cases, really 3, because Otis Edwards' case is still waiting too. So the first one is a classic night court prostitution case, but it's a good little bit of like rapid fire back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like get through that, and then Dan even sort of like propositions the prostitute, and
yes,
she's like, forget about it.
The whole thing is rapid fire, just quickly, and again, just well executed.
But Dan's like, oh, he's 318 pounds behind. Now, Otis is not a small man.
No, he's not.
And that's probably going to be a conviction of
Didn't seem like he's factoring in Otis in his calculations.
No. Maybe he was already at it.
Yeah.
I don't know. And this huge guy comes up, and Dan, the thing he does every now, like, goes into like Southern preacher mode. Thank you, Lord.
Yes.
And it's a sweet Jabba the Hutt.
What an exclamation.
Yes.
I have to start using that one.
And it was I think a car theft, and
yeah, it might have even been a car stereo theft or something.
Yes, car stereo theft. And then this little guy comes up, and it turns out that he's the one who did it. They're brothers, and the big guy's covering for him because he's on parole. Yeah. And so they have to kick that one back out.
Yeah. And the guy's got that classic little man in a sitcom voice.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He just has that tone and that cadence, which is so like classic, a little guy in a sitcom.
And so then it's midnight, and the banker like pops a bottle of champagne, is like being really gloaty, and they're begging Otis, well, can't you just write a check? And he's, I'm fine losing that much in a bet, but I can't just give it away.
Yeah.
And then the nuns are praying, and the banker's glass shatters. He's like, will you quit making him do that? But Otis comes up with a final bet. He's going to arm wrestle Harry, who, as Christine says, has arms that could clean out pipe stems.
Yes.
And, Dan and Mac make a little side bet. Seem very Cheers.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
the side bet. And Christine and Mac are offering words of encouragement, and he's holding his own. But then Bull asks him, classic Bull, if he remembered to go to the bathroom.
Yes. There's like the ebb and flow. Yeah. And just when Harry's, got the momentum and stuff, Bull says that, and then it goes back the other way.
So he's faltering, and Christine walks behind everybody, and she flashes Otis, and Harry wins because Otis is distracted.
Yes.
And poor Dan wasn't paying attention. No one was looking.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you get a lot of little jokes. One of the nuns says, if I hadn't seen it myself, I wouldn't have believed it. And Otis, oh, you and me both.
Yeah.
But Otis tells her, it was worth every penny.
Yeah, and again, this is all like PG-13, but
yes,
it's like sort of there's something charming about the courtly way that he just respects. He's like appreciative, like genuinely appreciative, and he's not as over the top like about it as he could have been. Otis really seems like a pretty decent guy.
He does, yeah.
He's honorable. Uh-huh. He gave them a chance to like get the money in another way.
Right.
He doesn't balk at it could have been the distraction finish.
Right, he could have called them on saying that was cheating or something.
No, instead he goes with it and says, "Hey,
Of course, he got something."
Yes, he did. Yes, but yeah, I kind of respect Otis.
Yeah. And like Harry's being very over the top too.
Yeah,
I saw in his eyes astonishment, confusion, nay, even a little fear. He was in the presence of greatness. Christine's like, "Thanks."
Yes.
Freeze frame out. All in all, good stuff.
Great episode, very well constructed and balanced. It moves quickly. There's a great balance between you got the through line of the bet, but also you have the balance between a few cases that take longer and also some of the rapid fire cases that go quickly. A couple that are basically just sight gags. It just all comes together. It is a truly remarkable episode.
Yeah, like you said, Ross didn't get to do much. I don't know that Mac got to do a whole lot, but it's still, really fine.
And the episode does reveal, in its own way, it reveals some of the character, of it. It shows you like little things like Harry kind of being animated, but, sometimes a little oblivious. Christine, she doesn't have a lot of time to show, but they do make it clear that like this isn't something she would normally do. That she's desperate. They actually say, I think it shows what you'll do when you're desperate or something like that. Dan, of course, the whole episode is classic. Dan, you got moments with Bull, the naivete, and also like just kind of like the surreal moments, like him holding his breath for 18 minutes and how he responds to that. Mac, classic support role for Harry. Yeah, Roz is the only one that doesn't get as many moments, but she's there, so that's good. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you can't. That's not a knock on the episode at all. And it's funny. It's hilarious. I really enjoyed this episode.
Yes.
Here's a question that I don't think we need to get into, but I'm just going to throw this out there. Is Night Court one of the most pro-religious shows ever? Because if you think about it, and we've mentioned like several episodes in this already, there's a very real higher power throughout the show, and there's many references to that throughout the whole show. And it's made clear that there's a God watching and listening and reacting.
Yeah, I think in a general way. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know if it's pro any particular religion.
Yeah, that's true.
A sort of Judeo-Christian
yes
basis, but yeah.
It's almost like God is a recurring character in the show.
Yes.
I mean, but there's many episodes where, it's just a key part of it is somebody, talking to, responding to, or something happening, like, forces of nature and things. And
yeah, he's not always a benevolent. He's like that thing you mentioned. Harry's thing was almost like a, why aren't you paying attention kind of. Mm-hmm. So someone wrestling with it. I think that's part of it too. People wrestling.
Yes. Well,
some episode where Bull was doing,
yes, where he loses all his money.
Yes. Why did you make me do this?
Yeah. And then, it comes out with a satisfactory conclusion.
That's right.
That reaffirms Bull's faith.
That's right. Yeah.
Just an interesting thing I thought I'd mention.
Did we even want to talk about the new version? I've only seen one episode, so I don't really have
I've got mixed reactions to it. John Larroquette's awesome. They have changed the character in ways that's appropriate now. He's always worth watching. From what I've seen, they haven't quite found it yet, but maybe they will. Yeah. But overall,
I told you I'd seen a clip and it looked kind of cheap to me. Mm-hmm. I watched a full episode. It looked better watching it in context, but it's still, there's something almost like Disney Channel about it.
Yeah.
The way it looks and even like, doing the little transitions with little musical stings and which seems like I mean, the original Night Court didn't do that.
Right.
and the props to using at least a shortened version of the theme song, although it sounds more 80s.
Yeah.
Their recording of it.
Yeah.
It's like all guitars instead of saxophones in it.
That's true.
And then it has like a keyboard doing the little click clave thing. And
truncating it hurts.
Yes, it does.
And also I think it's the one thing, I don't know if I was talking to you about it or maybe someone else, but it just like, it shows to me like kind of one of the problems with modern network sitcoms is they're given like maybe 22 minutes, but they're trying to do like 3 stories in one episode.
Yeah. And
everything just feels rushed. Like they don't necessarily have enough time to do things. And I think they'd be better off just like focusing on one thing like this instead of trying to get in these B stories and C stories and like splitting up the character. They do the thing where they split up the characters to pair them off and give them their own little story and reveal character about them. And that's a noble ambition, but you don't even have to like 23 minutes anymore. So I think for me personally as a viewer, I'm getting to the point where I'm really starting to feel like in these shows where they're missing like the extra 2 or 3 minutes. I think they've kind of gone too far to do these kind of shows with multiple storylines.
You had told me the Wendy Malick episode was okay. I happened to choose it. I didn't know that's what it was. I just read the description and it was centered around Dan. So I thought, okay, I'll watch that. And I was kind of like, okay, it's good. And then there's a twist in it. Once the twist happened, it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
And the what is her name? Gergs.
Yeah.
The bailiff.
Yeah.
I kind of like it. She's like a weird, like they somehow smushed all of the previous bailiffs into one character. But she's got her own thing too.
Right.
But like the thing she was talking about Die Hard, and she kept referring to John McClane as Die Hard.
Yeah.
A young Die Hard is riding on a plane or something. I thought, okay, that's kind of fun. But I didn't get a whole sense of it. And I think, and maybe this is like a COVID thing or something, but there just aren't a lot of extras.
Right.
Like milling around.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And part of original Night Court, part of what gives it its seediness is all these, punks and things milling about. And again, this was probably accurate somewhat to New York culture, but the attitude about it wouldn't fly now. But a lot of men dressed as women and stuff.
Yeah. This was on the shelf for a long time. I think they sat on it for like a year before putting it.
The new one, yeah.
Yeah, and it feels very sterile.
Yes.
Just in many ways. And the cheapness, I got the same impression, which is weird considering, like the original Night Court was an 80s sitcom shot on video. You know, there's nothing like particularly sophisticated about it.
No.
But for some reason, this one does look cheap. So I'll put it this way. I think I'm going to give it more of a try. But if it wasn't Night Court, I probably wouldn't have watched more beyond a couple episodes because it was okay, but not something I'd stick with. But the original Night Court took a while to get going as well.
Yeah. And you know, I think it's cool that it is bringing attention to the whole show.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully people are going and watching it freebie, you know, enjoying it.
Yeah, which even the original, you know, I read like with the finale, a review by a prominent television critic, kind of ripping on the show and just saying it was uneven. It seemed like he wasn't just bashing like the last episode, he was bashing the show in general. And he called like Harry Anderson blandly wacky or something like that. You want to guess who that critic was? He's somebody we both know we haven't heard from in a while probably.
Gary Deeb?
No, not Gary Deeb.
Tom Hendren?
No.
Excuse me, Ron Hendren.
It was the Tuck, Ken Tucker, for Entertainment Weekly.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh boy, it just seemed like, boy, this guy just totally didn't enjoy the show. But it's like
sourpuss.
It was really like negative. It's like, again, kind of bringing it back. It's like maybe at the time it was past its prime, but he didn't really seem to like enjoy the show at all or have any appreciation for what it was in its prime. And in its prime, it was a really one of the funniest shows on TV.
And that's the fine point here.
I think so.
You know, just hilarious.
Right.
Unless you don't have a sense of humor. I don't know what that means.
That might be true of a lot of shows, though.
Right, yeah. It's interesting that for a while it was leading into LA Law.
Yeah.
That's a lot of wacky courtroom stuff
That's
for
a
one
good point.
night.
I hadn't thought about that, yeah.
Maybe LA Law felt pressure. Like, well, we got to out-wacky them.
Yeah.
You know?
There was a big professional rivalry between those two shows, probably.
Yeah. We got to have Corbin Burnson, you know, defending a chimp. I don't know if that happened, but
I wouldn't be surprised.
That happened on Night Court, right?
Yeah,
there was an orangutan.
Yes, there was. Although he wasn't actually a defendant, but
yes.
Like a lab animal.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a Mr. Smith joke in that episode.
That's right. Yeah.
Anyway, good stuff. And again, thanks to Ian for all your input and your podcast. Great show to start the season.
Yeah, it is. And boy, I think we've said a lot about Night Court.
You know, you can't predict the baddies, but I think Night Court will, you know, at least make a good run at it.
I would not be surprised. Yeah. I would not be surprised. I don't know if all our episodes this season are, if we're going to go into this much depth on a show, but Night Court I think was worthy of it. I think there's a lot to consider with this one.
And with that, the episode is adjourned.
This episode brought to you by Otis Edwards' Anything Book. If you want to bet on something, on anything, log on and join the action. Wager $1 on the length of Bull Shannon stubble and get $200 in bets. This episode also brought to you by Reinhold Weege. Reinhold? This episode also brought to you by... Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network Shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network Shows.